Greetings, Astrophiles. This is Pat Cosgrove, and I'd like to welcome you to Cosgrove's Cosmos. This YouTube channel is a companion to my main website, cosgrovescosmos.com, which covers my journey into astrophotography, covering images, gear, tips, and techniques. Today, I'd like to talk about a change I recently made in my Askar FRA400 Imaging Platform. I went from IOptron CEm26 mount over to the brand new ZWO AM5 Harmonic mount. I'd like to talk about what the AM5 brings to the table for astrophotographers. Let's get started. Telescope platforms are not a static thing. They evolve with time. We buy new gear, we upgrade things, we try new things, and the configuration changes. On my website, one of the things that I do is for each of my telescope platforms, I create a posting about every particular change I make on my platform. Then when I have an imaging project, that particular posting can point back to the version of the telescope platform that was used when that image was captured. Since I recently changed the mount on my FRA400 platform, I did a new post which was recently published on the website which covers this change. When I first built the Askar FRA400 platform, I needed a mount. And at that time, I chose the IOptron CEm26 as the mount I was going to go with. I was looking for something light and very portable and easy to use. And the CEm26 seemed to fit that bill. And I've been using it now for over a year, and I've gotten a lot of good images with it. But I have started to run into some issues. I recently posted a video on my IC1848 imaging project, the Soul Nebula, and it was in the middle of this project that I crossed over the mounts. The first two nights were shot with the CEm26, and then the last night was shot with the AM5. In that video, I went into quite a bit of detail about some of the problems I was running into with the CEm26. So I'm not going to repeat that in detail here. I'll just list what they are so you get a feel for what I was wrestling with. The first problem had to do with declination backlash. This mount has always had a lot of backlash, but IOptron provides a procedure for tightening the declination drive belt, which tends to minimize that. The problem was part of the housing that you have to tighten up is plastic, and I was afraid to over-tighten things and damage the plastic. And as a result of that, the adjustments wouldn't stay put. They would sort of slide with time, and so I had varying amounts of backlash, and that was starting to become frustrating to deal with. The second issue I had to deal with was balancing. The mount would do a good job if the load was well balanced, but I recently put a camera rotator on the optical tube assembly. And as it worked, it would shift the rotational position of the camera, and with it, the electronic filter wheel. This sticks out a little bit from the body of the tube, and depending where it was, it could change and have an impact on the overall balance of the system. Sometimes this was an issue, sometimes it wasn't. It all depended on what position it was in. I was hoping for something that would be a little bit more robust. The third issue I was dealing with was weight. While the head of the CEm26 only weighed 10 pounds and it carried a 26-pound load, it only did so when it was well balanced. And in order to balance it, you had to have a counterweight. And the counterweight added another 10 pounds. So we're really talking about a mount that weighed about 20 pounds to handle about a 26-pound load. So that got a little bit heavier than I would like it to be for portability. Now, the whole mount as it is now, I could easily pick up and move from my driveway back into my garage. But I have bad knees, and carrying the weight any distance is causing some difficulty for me these days, so I wish I had something that was a little bit lighter. The final problem I had to deal with was the fact that when I first got the mount and I locked the clutches, there was no movement at all on the right ascension axis. However, now I have developed a bit of a wobble. Something has loosened up inside the mount, and this wobble is causing issues as I'm starting to see elongated stars that I had not seen in the past. So all of these things made me think that perhaps it was time to start looking for an alternative. It was around this time I started to hear about the new ZWO AM5 Harmonic mount. I was intrigued by this because it used a new technology drive, and I wanted to learn more about it. Does this mean then I was completely turned off of the CEm26 and couldn't wait to get rid of it? Well, no, not really. The mount has served me really well for a year. I think there's some issues that can be dealt with, and my plan right now is to take them out over this next winter and see if I can't address those issues. What I'd really like to do is end up with a fourth telescope platform, perhaps with an even shorter focal length scope that I could put on. So I'm not done with the CEm26 by any means, but I think it's going to need some work, and I expect to see it back adding to yet another platform on my driveway. But let's talk about the AM5 for a moment. The AM5 is an example of a mount that uses harmonic or wave strain technology to create a telescope drive. What does this even mean? Most equatorial telescopes drive the right extension axis with a worm gear assembly. A larger drive gear is fixed to the axis, and it engages with a small worm gear, which turns slowly, and as it engages the larger drive gear, will rotate the axes. Depending on the design and the machining of the gear set, anywhere between 1 and 4 teeth from the worm gear are engaging the drive gear and bearing the load at any given time. Because of this, balance is very critical. The better you have the system balanced, the less load and less torque is loaded onto the faces of the gears doing the driving. Machining differences on the gears themselves and how they meet drives a periodic error as the gear set works its way through the entire range. This characteristic error is repeatable and often is used in PEC or periodic error correction used by some mounts. With this arrangement, reversing direction can cause backlash, as the worm gear needs to disengage with one set of drive faces, back up until it engages the opposing side face of the gear, and then it can start to drive. In that period, you can have a little bit of slop, and that can cause backlash. Worm drive arrangements are very common in equatorial telescopes, have been used for years, and can do an excellent job, especially if the quality of the parts and the machining is very high. Harmonic or strain wave drive systems are very different, but they're not new. They were first described in a patent way back in 1957 by C.W. Musser. Over the years, this technology has found significant use in robotics and in the aerospace industry. The lunar rover used this kind of technology to drive its wheels across the lunar surface, and the space station uses this kind of technology for unfurling the solar panels that it depends on. The strain wave design is based on the elasticity of metal and has 3 fundamental components. The first is a rotating, central, elliptically shaped wave generator, as can be seen in this diagram in green. The second piece is a fixed circular spline, which can be seen on the outside of this diagram in blue. The final piece is a flex spine, which can be seen between these 2 components in red. As the central wave generator rotates, it forces the flex spline against the outer spline, causing the teeth to mesh at that particular point. As the wave generator continues to rotate, it shifts this region of contact. And since the number of teeth in the flex spline is different than the number of teeth in the fixed outer circular spline, this induces a rotation in the system. The difference in the number of teeth between the circular spline and the flex spline is what drives various gearing ratios. Very high gearing ratios can be developed with this kind of system. This style of gearing has several advantages. For one, it's a very robust system since there are relatively few moving parts. In addition, this is a very strong design. While a worm gear might only have between, say, 1 and 4 teeth engaged at any point in carrying the load, in this design, 30% of the teeth are fully engaged at any moment. This produces a drive system which is very strong and can handle a lot of torque. In addition, a system with this kind of design has almost no backlash. When the wave generator forces the splines together and the teeth are fully enmeshed, there's no slop in the system. If you change direction, you don't have a situation where the gear has to disengage with one face, seek out the opposite face in order to change direction. The gears are fully enmeshed and the operation just changes direction without any gear slop whatsoever. And finally, with the smooth gear meshing that's involved with the operation of the harmonic drive, these tend to be very quiet systems. The AM5 is not the only Astro mount to use this technology. RST has had one for quite a while now, and it seemed to be a fairly solid product. And IOptron and Pegasus Astro are also working on offerings in this space. So expect to see more competition and more drives using this technology as we go forward. The AM5 uses strain wave technology for both the right ascension and declination axis. The AM5 has excellent machining, fit, and finish. In addition to that, the head is only 11 pounds, yet it'll support a load of 26 pounds without any counterweight whatsoever. If you add a counterweight in, the load it supports goes up to 44 pounds. This offers some real flexibility for astrophotographers and the kind of gear they might want to mount on it. The AM5 does not need a counterweight, and it doesn't need precise balancing either. And in fact, there's almost no way to do that kind of balancing. Normally, one would release the clutches so the axes spin free, and that would allow you to shift the weights around so that each axis is carefully balanced. But there's no clutches in the AM5 to be released. And so you really don't have that freedom of action to do that kind of balancing. Fortunately, you don't need it because of the torque and the power of this system, that you don't have to do that. For someone like me, where balancing was becoming a little tricky because I had a shifting center of gravity with the camera rotation, that's a perfect solution for me. I don't have to worry about it, and the mount seems to be able to handle that. So this AM5 offers a real weight advantage, but it also offers a carbon fiber tripod that it can be mounted on, which has a really nice design and is several pounds lighter than the lightest tripod that I had from IOptron. My whole package together weighs less than 30 pounds, which is pretty attractive when I'm carrying that back and forth in the driveway. I also placed an order for the TC40 carbon fiber tripod. This is a 5-pound tripod that can handle a 110-pound load, which is pretty nice. And it uses a circular quick attach-detach mounting system that makes it very easy to pop the mount in and lock it in, or release it and take it out. Finally, I ordered the 160 millimeter Pier extension. I like to make sure that my main tube assembly, as it's moving through the night, doesn't have anything sticking out that would hit one of the legs of the tripod. So I like to have a little bit of separation there. And at the time I ordered, the 160 millimeter extension was the only one that was really available. This extension weighs a little over 2 pounds and gives me about a 6.5 inch extension above the tripod. It also uses this circular quick attach detach, so it's very convenient to lock either to the mount or into the tripod. It's rated at 28 pounds, which should be sufficient for my 12.5 pound optical tube assembly. But frankly, I would have liked to have gotten one of the other versions, which is a little bit more solid and carries a heavier load, but they weren't available yet. So we're going to see how we make out with this particular extension. Early results look very positive, but I'll let you know how things work out down the road. This can always be swapped out if I find it's necessary to do so. Assembly of the tripod, the Pier extension, and the head of the mount was very simple. And mounting my optical tube assembly onto it was also simple. Basically, it only really required me to take it off one mount and clamp it on the other. What was not so simple is the cable management, and that wasn't as simple for two fundamental reasons. First off, things were in different locations, so all the careful cable management I had done in the past had to be pretty much undone and redone for this particular configuration. The second is that some places where the cables plug into the AM5 are parts of the mounts that move. I would have preferred that ZWO had put all the cable connections lower in the base where there was no movement, but they didn't do that. So now it was important for me to not only get good cable management, but to do so in such a way that I was fairly confident that I wasn't going to have any cable snags as the mount went through its motions. Given the power and the torque of the motor, this could be interesting, because if you had a good cable snag, it's quite possible that things would just get unplugged by the power of the mount. It's also possible it could rip things out. It is very powerful. So I had to take some care with that, but that seemed to work out pretty well. Once the mount was assembled and I had the cable management worked out, I ended up with a configuration I was pretty happy with. So let me show a few pictures of this final arrangement, and I'll even throw in a bit of a video here so you can see it in operation. What took a little bit more time was the software configuration, changing the mount over. There are things that had to change in the laptop that I used to drive everything with, but I covered that in some detail in my IC1848 video, so I'm not going to cover that here. And I also cover it in quite a bit of detail on the web posting, so you can see more details of that there. I'll wrap up by saying that my first night of operation with the AM5 mount turned out very well. As I got the sequence started, I was seeing the RMS errors being reported by PhD2, and the numbers I saw were like 0.38 seconds of RMS error. This made me very nervous because it was so good. Typically on the CEm26, I was getting something well over 1.0 seconds. Sometimes I even had it as high as 1.8 seconds. So this is such a drastic reduction. I didn't trust it and I didn't believe it. But as I went through several hours of data collection, I pretty much was getting the same results being reported back. I think by the end of the evening, it may have gone up to 0.4. But again, very good results. I did go inside at one point and verified on my main image processing computer that all the subs coming in were showing nice, round, tight stars, and that the quality I was getting was exactly what I hoped for. So the results were spectacularly good, and I was very enthused by what the system was now producing. And it certainly was better when compared to the CEm26. Remember, the first two nights were captured using that mount. So what I've done here is I've captured guide logs from both the subs collected with the AM5 and subs collected with the CEm26 that I'd like to share with you. Now, the vertical scale here is about the same, so they're pretty comparable. And as I show you the first one, this is what I got over the first two nights with the CEm26. And I will say that I was seeing frames with some egg-shaped stars and some elongation going on there, so I wasn't happy about that. But here's what that looked like. Now contrast that with what I was getting with the AM5 in the last night. You can see how much tighter the plots are, and I was getting nice round stars. So this shows you a little bit of a comparison between the two. Now, it's really only one night's worth of experience, because that's the last clear night we've had. As we get into the November, December timeframe in my area, we're pretty much clouded over, and I don't know when I'm going to see my next free night. But my early results with AM5 are extremely positive, and I'm very enthusiastic about the technology it uses and the solution it provides. Again, I would encourage you to see the post on my website. I'll have a link in it below if you want to get a little bit more detail. And as I get more experience on the mount, I'll be updating that particular post to share my results with this particular configuration. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. And I thank you for spending time with Cosgrove's Cosmos today. If you're considering the purchase of an AM5, I hope this background will give you a little bit more information that'll help you make your decision. Please consider subscribing and ringing the bell. This will ensure that you don't miss any new content as it's released and will support the channel. And as always, your feedback and comments are very welcome, both here on this channel and for my main website. I always take time to answer any comments or questions that come my way, so I look forward to hearing from you. This is Pat Cosgrove signing off for Cosgrove's Cosmos, and I wish you clear skies and excellent seeing.